This is Story Recapped. Today I'm going to explain a drama fantasy mystery film called Dorian Gray. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Blood sprays onto his body and clothes as Dorian Gray stabs a man to death. Later, Dorian puts the body in a vault and throws it into the river. A year before the dreadful murder, Dorian arrives in London with eyes full of wonder and innocence. He nearly gets robbed until his grandfather's butler, Victor, shows up to take him home. Upon their arrival, Dorian notices that nothing has changed at the house since he was a boy. When he sees Dorian staring at the portrait, Victor offers his condolences for the recent death of his grandfather Kelso. After some time, Dorian gets acquainted with the city's aristocrats, including a reputable painter, Basil Hallward. Basil is instantly drawn to Dorian's comely appearance, so it doesn't take long for him to start working on Dorian's portrait. While Dorian gets dressed after posing for Basil, the painter notices the numerous scars on Dorian's back. Dorian wishes to meet more people, so Basil reluctantly takes him to a party hosted by Lord Henry Wotton. During the party, Henry introduces himself to Dorian by offering him a cigarette. When Basil sees them together, he warns Dorian not to believe anything Henry tells him. One day, Henry sits while Basil works on Dorian's portrait. Henry tries to peek at Basil's progress, but the artist refuses to let him see it. Basil notes that he needs to take a break, so Henry takes him to a seedy bar. Dorian is disconcerted by the licentious activities at the establishment, but Henry tells him that no one should be ashamed of seeking pleasure. Dorian believes that pursuing illicit desires might have a detrimental effect on a person's soul, but Henry dismisses his concerns. Basil leaves the bar to finish the portrait, leaving Henry and Dorian. Dorian notices a beautiful woman in the bar, and Henry encourages him to speak to her. Sensing Dorian's reluctance, Henry confesses his envy over Dorian's youth and beauty. Soon, the woman leaves with her male counterpart. Dorian surmises that the man was her husband. Henry advises Dorian to seize every opportunity that comes his way because life is short and there's nothing beyond death. When Basil shows them the finished painting, Dorian is astounded by the glamorous likeness in the picture. Henry points out that the painting will look the same as time goes by, but Dorian will eventually age and his beauty will fade. Dorian remarks that he would offer his soul to the devil to maintain his appearance. Henry doubts that Dorian would trade his soul, but Dorian insists that he would. Dorian hangs the painting in front of Kelso's portrait. During a party to exhibit the artwork, Dorian tells Henry that his grandfather refused to look at him because he blames him for the death of his mother, who died during childbirth. Later that night, Dorian goes out on his own to have a drink, but he ends up in front of a theater, where he sees a picture of the attractive woman he saw at the bar the other night. The attendant reveals that the woman is an actress named Sybil Vane, and she plays Ophelia in Shakespeare's drama Hamlet. Dorian watches the play and visits Sybil in her dressing room after the performance. Sybil recognizes Dorian from the other night. Dorian admits he wanted to say hello to her at that time, but she left with another man. Dorian is delighted to learn that the man was her brother, Jim. Before leaving, Dorian commends Sybil's performance and admires her radiant beauty. Soon, Dorian courts her. Sybil worries that Dorian might be pursuing other women, but he assures Sybil that he only has eyes for her. While Dorian prepares for another rendezvous with Sybil, Henry asks about the nature of their relationship. Dorian contends that his feelings for Sybil are sacred, but Henry argues that Dorian is denying his erotic desires because he is afraid of a scandal. Henry gives him a cigarette case with an engraving of his name. That night, Dorian takes Sybil to his house and gives her a new dress. After a few hours, Dorian tries to kiss her, but she tells him that she should leave. However, Dorian convinces her to stay the night with him. Sybil fears what will happen if she gives herself fully to him, so Dorian declares his love for her. Sybil agrees to make love to Dorian after declaring that he is all that she will ever want in this world. After a passionate evening, Dorian dreams about the mistreatment he received from his grandfather. Dorian wakes up and accidentally breaks the lamp beside his bed. Sybil treats his wound and warns him that it will leave a scar. Dorian isn't worried because he has more scars on his back. However, Sybil doesn't see any scars on his back. When he looks in the mirror, Dorian is startled to find that the scars are gone. Dorian soon announces his engagement to Sybil. He invites his friends to see Sybil's performance at the theater, but only Henry accepts the invitation. On their way to the theater, Henry discloses that his wife, Victoria, is pregnant. Dorian congratulates him, but Henry fears that having a child marks the end of his hedonistic lifestyle. Henry takes Dorian to a brothel instead of the theater. When Dorian asks if Victoria knows about his trips to the brothel, Henry explains that marriage only makes deception necessary. Henry offers Dorian some opium and tells him that the only way to overcome temptation is to yield to it. As the drug takes effect, Dorian makes love to several women at the brothel. Upon their arrival, Dorian tells Sabile that they weren't in the audience because they were late. When Dorian shares that Henry is going to be a father, Sabile expresses her desire to start a family soon. Dorian stresses that he is not ready because they're too young. When Henry leaves, Sabile points out that Dorian is behaving strangely. After deducing that he must have slept with harlots, she lashes out at him, so Dorian gets exasperated. Dorian leaves after she advises him not to let Henry influence him. At home, Dorian notices a fly resting on his portrait. When he takes a closer look, he sees that the eye of the portrait seems to be decaying. The next day, Dorian goes to an art exhibition with his friends, but he feels miserable over the way he left Sabile the previous night. Henry tries to cheer him up by pointing out that many girls will throw themselves at him. Dorian invites some people to his home for a few drinks, only to find that Jim is waiting for him to return the dress he gave Sabile. When Dorian notices that the dress is filthy, Jim angrily informs him that Sabile was wearing it when she threw herself in the river. Jim reveals that Sabile was pregnant when she died. Dorian is distraught by the news. He runs after Jim to express his grief, but Jim strangles him. Soon, Henry and his friends fend off Jim. The police take Jim away. Henry assures Dorian that Sabile's death wasn't his fault. He convinces Dorian to just look at the situation as just another extraordinary experience in his life. When Henry leaves, Dorian notices that the wound mysteriously appeared on the hand of the portrait. He then takes off the bandage on his hand and discovers that the wound has healed. A maggot suddenly crawls out of the eye of the portrait and falls to the ground, so Dorian crushes it. Basil stops by the next day to console Dorian, but he's baffled to find out that Dorian's portrait is no longer on display. Dorian tells him that the painting is too valuable, so he doesn't want it to be displayed. Basil worries that Dorian doesn't seem to be distraught about Sabile's death anymore, so he advises him to be more skeptical about Henry's advice. Later, Dorian attends a debut celebration of Celia Radley. Before long, Dorian gets intimate with the girl after some encouragement from Henry. After a while, her mother, Lady Radley, searches for Celia, so Henry suggests that she might be in the bedroom with Dorian. Lady Radley finds Dorian alone in the bedroom. Dorian seduces Lady Radley after assuring her that he wasn't there with Celia. After copulating with Lady Radley, Dorian tells Celia to get up from under the bed and continue what they started. As Dorian continues his path to debauchery, the decomposition on his face of the portrait becomes more apparent. He keeps the painting locked up in the attic and wears the key around his neck to make sure that no one else will get in. On his birthday, Basil asks Dorian to lend him the portrait for an upcoming exhibition. However, Dorian doesn't allow the painting to leave the house because it's too precious. Basil insists on borrowing it, so Dorian kisses Basil and prompts him to go down on him so he can forget about the painting. Basil returns in the morning to confront Dorian about his poor treatment of other people. Basil worries that he no longer sees the Dorian Gray that he painted when he looks at him. Dorian shows Basil the portrait to make him see that he didn't change at all. Basil is appalled upon seeing the painting. Concerned about its effects on Dorian, Basil suggests destroying his own work. When he can't convince Dorian, Basil runs away, but Dorian stabs him in the neck. Dorian continues to stab Basil until he's dead. Later, Dorian puts Basil's body in a vault and throws it into the river. Days later, Dorian visits Henry, but Victoria informs him that the police have found Basil's body in the river. Dorian gives a eulogy at Basil's funeral. Later on, Dorian invites Henry on a trip around the world, but Henry can't go because Victoria will be giving birth soon. Dorian goes on the trip alone, but tells Henry about his adventures in his letters. When Dorian returns home after more than 2 decades, he immediately goes to the attic to check on the portrait. The next morning, Dorian shows up at a party that Henry prepared for him. Henry's guests are astounded that Dorian hasn't aged a day. Later, a woman named Emily introduces herself to Dorian after taking a photo with Henry. Dorian finds her behavior odd, so Henry reveals that Emily is his daughter. As his memories of Sabile return, he starts to feel remorseful for his part in her demise. When Dorian visits Sabile's grave, Jim recognizes him and follows him all over the city. Jim finally confronts Dorian when he finds him alone on a desolate street. Jim stresses that he waited so many years to get his revenge on Dorian. When Jim threatens to shoot him, Dorian points out that he can't be the man Jim is looking for because he's barely 20 years old. Jim lets him go, but soon realizes Dorian lied when he sees that Dorian left behind his cigarette case. One day, Emily visits Dorian and invites him for a picnic outside. During the picnic, Emily expresses her fascination with Dorian's unhappiness despite his devotion to pleasure. In response, Dorian points out that pleasure is not the same as happiness. Emily deduces that Dorian is not as heartless as the rumor suggests, but Dorian warns her about getting close to him. While Dorian plays the piano at a fundraising event for the military, a man interrupts the performance by taking his daughter away. The man exclaims that he would rather crawl into the sewers before allowing his daughter to go near Dorian. Dorian tries to continue his performance, but he's unnerved when he imagines Basil among the audience. Later on, Dorian walks Emily home, but he tells her that they should not be seen together again because of his reputation. He confesses that he's done terrible things and he's now paying the price. When he gets home, Dorian fires Victor for attempting to open the attic without his permission. Afterward, he tries to stab the portrait, but he can't bear to do it. Dorian goes to church to confess his transgressions to a priest. He begs the priest for help, but the priest can't offer him any solutions to his predicament. When he gets back to his car, Jim shoots him, but he misses. Dorian runs to the subway to escape, but Jim catches up to him on the train tracks. As Jim aims his gun at Dorian, an incoming train hits him. Dorian runs over to Jim and apologizes for what he did, before Jim succumbs to his injuries. Later, Dorian stops by Henry's house to see Emily. Dorian tries to tell Emily the truth, but he soon passes out. Emily sleeps next to him by the fireplace until the next morning. When Henry wakes up, he is dismayed to see Emily and Dorian lying next to each other. Henry castigates Dorian for forming a relationship with Emily, so Dorian explains that he's changed. Henry believes that Dorian hasn't changed at all and tells Dorian to stay away from Emily. After Dorian leaves, Henry looks at an old photo of Dorian and recalls his remarks that he'd trade his soul to keep his youthful appearance. Despite Henry's warnings, Emily goes to Dorian's home and expresses her love for him. Meanwhile, Henry learns from Victor that Dorian stored his portrait in the attic. As Emily and Dorian get intimate, she notices the key he's wearing and asks about it. Dorian ignores the question and continues to make love to her. That exact moment, Henry goes to the locksmith and pays for a copy of the key to Dorian's attic. That night, Dorian wakes up in his bed and finds that his key is missing. He immediately runs to the attic and finds Emily attempting to unlock the door. He asks Emily for the key, but she opens the door and sees the horrible painting. Dorian strangles her until she drops the key, but he wakes up from the nightmare and discovers that the key is still safe with him. Soon, Dorian decides to sell his house so that he and Emily can move to New York. The night before their departure, Henry throws them a party. When Henry suddenly leaves in the middle of the gathering, Dorian realizes that he might be going to his house to find the portrait. Dorian immediately runs back to his house, but Henry opens the attic before he can arrive. Dorian manages to reach the attic before Henry can unveil the painting. As Dorian begs Henry to leave, Henry notices Basil's blood-stained scarf and realizes that Dorian killed him. When Henry asks Dorian what kind of man he is, Dorian furiously reminds him that he was merely adhering to all the advice Henry had given him over the years. Dorian strangles Henry out of anger, but he suddenly hears Emily calling out to him. While Dorian is distracted, Henry knocks him out with a poker and uncovers the painting. Henry is horrified to see the ghastly man in the picture move, so he throws the gas lamp on the canvas. As the painting burns, Henry leaves the attic and locks Dorian inside. Emily soon reaches the attic only to find that Dorian is trapped while the fire spreads throughout the room. She asks Dorian to give her the key to free him, but Dorian refuses out of guilt for all the things he's done. As Henry drags Emily out of the mansion, Dorian turns back to the painting and stabs the image. Dorian's appearance turns ghastly, much like the painting. Dorian stabs the painting once more, and the painting screams. Soon, the fire consumes the entire room. Months later, Henry tries to reconcile with Emily, but she refuses to speak to him. Henry goes to the attic in his house, where he keeps Dorian's portrait. After staring at the picture, he remarks that nobody could bear to look at Basil's painting of Dorian in its current state. Although the frame has been charred, the image has mysteriously reverted to depict a young and handsome Dorian Gray.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.